Spanish language interpretation is available for today's webinar. I'm going to turn it over to Tanya, our interpreter, who will walk you through how to access it. Tanya?
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Tania, one of your Spanish interpreters today. I'm going to share instructions in Spanish and then I'll do it in English. Buenas tardes a todos o bienvenidos o buenos días, dependiendo de dónde estén. Bienvenidos a su reunión. Voy a compartirles información de cómo pueden accesar al canal de español para poder obtener la interpretación simultánea. En este momento aún la función no está activada, pero una vez que se active, si ustedes se unieron con una computadora, en la parte de abajo de su menú de Zoom van a ver el icono de un mundo o un globo. Seleccionen donde dice español y pueden silenciar el audio original para que nada más escuchen la voz del intérprete. Si no ven el mundo o el globo rápidamente, puede ser que tengan que seleccionar los 3 puntitos que aparecen donde dice más o more en inglés y ahí van a buscar más opciones, buscar el mundo e interpretación. Si ustedes ingresaron con un celular o con una tableta, sus opciones se ven diferentes. Necesitan tocar su pantalla y van a buscar el menú de los 3 puntitos que aparece usualmente si es un celular en la parte de abajo, si es una tableta arriba que dice más o more en inglés. Van a buscar donde dice interpretación de idioma o el mundo. Si no lo ven rápidamente, necesitan deslizar su pantalla un poco hacia la izquierda para ver más opciones. Seleccionan español, silenciar el audio original y por último, muy importante, seleccionar donde dice done, listo o finalizado para que ya puedan accesar a la interpretación. Y ahora voy a compartir esas instrucciones en inglés. Hello, everyone. Again, this is Tania, one of your Spanish interpreters. I'm going to share instructions on how to access the interpretation in case you're a monolingual English speaker. We need you to select the English channel. That way you can have that immediate interpretation from Spanish into English. If you are joining with a computer, once the feature is activated, right now it's not. Once it's activated, you'll see a globe-like icon at the bottom of your Zoom menu. Please click on the globe and select English. If you don't see the globe right away, maybe you need to click on the 3 dots with the word more to find more options. If you are joining with a cell phone or a tablet, your options may be a bit different. You need to tap your screen and find the menu with the 3 dots with the word more, either on top if it's a tablet or at the bottom if it's a cell phone. Select the menu, select the globe or interpretation. If you don't see the globe right away, you need to swipe your finger a little bit or the screen a little bit to the left to find more options. Select interpretation, select English, and very important at the end to select done to finalize your options. Thank you so much. If you have any trouble accessing the interpretation, you can let us know. We can assist you with that. Thank you so much. We can start interpretation.
Thank you. And with that, we'll go ahead and start with today's program. I'm Lila Burgos, the Deputy Director here at the UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Institute. We're glad that you're here today. For those following along in Spanish, you can access the Spanish language version of today's presentation deck by selecting the Español tab at the top of your Zoom screen. We're glad you could join us today for this important conversation. The brutal immigration enforcement actions that started last June created fear and instability across Los Angeles, California, and the country. The consequences extended far beyond the individuals directly targeted. These inhumane actions impacted businesses, workers, and families. It's disrupted economies and communities, and it's affected every single one of us. Today, we'll look at what it's meant for Latino entrepreneurs. Before we begin, I want to remind you that The Cost of Fear, LPPI's report featured in today's presentation, is available for download. We'll provide the link in the follow-up resources after the presentation. Could we go to the next slide? I want to thank the funders whose generous support made this report possible: the Latino Community Foundation, the California Wellness Foundation, and the Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund. I also want to acknowledge the California Latino Legislative Caucus and the James Irvine Foundation, whose support of LPPI allows us to take on research like this. So the program will begin today with the presentation of research findings from Dr. Amada Armenta, LPPI's director, followed by remarks from Rudy Espinoza, president and CEO of our partners in this initiative, Inclusive Action for the City. Then we will hear directly from Gonzalo and Aurora, 2 small business owners who have experienced these impacts. A panel discussion with advocates and community leaders will follow, and we will take your questions during this time. Feel free to submit them at any point during the presentation using the Q&A function in the Zoom at the bottom of your screen. And now, I'm pleased to turn it over to Dr. Armenta, Director of LPPI and Associate Professor of Urban Planning at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs.
Thank you, Lila. Once again, for those of you following along in a particular language, in Spanish, you can access the Spanish language version of this presentation by selecting the Español tab at the top of your Zoom screen. If you're actually seeing the presentation in Spanish and you want to see it in English, you need to press the English tab on the top of your Zoom screen. Next slide. So to document the impacts of last summer's immigration enforcement raids on businesses in LA counties, we relied on two sources of data. And I'm going to walk you through this really quickly because I'm a researcher, so I have to tell you about our data. So first, we looked at anonymous cell phone data that shows how many people visit specific businesses at different days and different times. And the second thing we did is original field work. With the partnership of Inclusive Action for the City and other organizations, we conducted focus group interviews and surveys with 75 Latino business owners who work across LA County. These include street vendors, as well as people who own food trucks, restaurants, barber shops and beauty salons, and stores. Next slide. Here you see a map of LA County, and we've shaded it to show you where Latino residents live in the county. The darker the color, the higher the concentration of Latino residents. This map also marks the 9 enforcement sites that our research focused on. The sites that you see labeled are places that saw immigration enforcement actions in June 2025. And at each site, you'll see a red dot that marks the exact spot where an arrest or enforcement action took place. And then there are these little circles around that dot. These circles show a 1/4 mile and a 1/2 mile out from the enforcement site. So we examined what happened to businesses within those circles. There are 988 businesses within 1/2 mile of the 9 enforcement sites that we examined. And for each site, we compared customer business visits in the 2 weeks before an enforcement action took place to the 2 weeks after. Next slide. So here's what we found. Business visits went down in 8 of the 9 enforcement areas we examined. In some places, that decrease looked small. In other places, that decrease was over 10%. Here's what's more important. In the 2 weeks after each enforcement action, those nearly 1,000 businesses saw 46,000 fewer customers than in the 2 weeks before the raids. That's 46,000 customer visits that simply did not happen because of the enforcement actions happening around LA County and in those sites particularly. And we estimate that those nearly 1,000 businesses lost $3 million in revenue over 2 weeks. $3 million that people would have spent at those locations if they had been there. And that's not the floor, that's the ceiling. We know that there were hundreds of arrests in June 2025, that arrests continue across Los Angeles and haven't stopped. And this figure doesn't even count the 50,000 vendors that we know who live and work around Los Angeles. So the economic losses are far larger. Next, I want to walk you through what Latino entrepreneurs lived through firsthand. So the slides that follow show quotes from our interviews, and to protect people's privacy, all the names that are listed under those quotes are pseudonyms. Now, I'm not going to read the quotes to you, so I invite you to read them as I'm walking you through people's experiences. Next slide. So the first thing to note is that the raids immediately changed how businesses were operating in Los Angeles. 95% of the business owners that we surveyed reported an immediate drop and collapse in customers and sales. 2/3 of them temporarily closed or reduced their hours. Many started working behind locked doors, sometimes screening their clients. And you can read what this felt like for Berenice, who owns a party supply store in downtown LA that was a few blocks from Ambience Apparel, which was one of the first raid sites in June 2025. Next slide. Street vendors were also particularly vulnerable because their success in their sales requires public visibility. And that's the visibility that puts them at risk for arrest. Many simply stopped working, not earning any income, which Gilberto describes in the top quote. Businesses that did remain open described days where they saw no customers at all. And many had to absorb the costs of unsold or spoiled inventory that simply did not sell. They also lost opportunities as catering events, parties, and summer festivals were canceled. Zacarias, whose quote you see at the bottom, estimated that he lost $20,000 in catering events alone, as each of his bookings canceled one by one. Next slide. The owners who stayed open survived by absorbing the costs of operations however they could. Some shelved expansions that they had in the works. One consolidated from 2 sites to 1. Some laid off workers they could no longer pay. They took on more work themselves, and many took on new debt. In some cases, up to 6 figures. Next slide. This combination of fear of enforcement, of fear for their customers and their workers, for their employees, for their families, their businesses, and themselves, these took a toll on entrepreneurs' mental and physical health. 76% of the people we surveyed reported that enforcement impacted their well-being. They described insomnia, panic attacks, depression, anxiety, gastrointestinal problems. A number of business owners described having to get on new medications because they could no longer manage chronic conditions that had previously been under control. 2 vendors described getting facial paralysis, and one ended up in the hospital. We think this is especially important to highlight because as one business owner who recently closed down her shop told us, "When I'm not well, my business is not well." Next slide. A year later, 93% of these businesses were still reporting financial difficulty. More than half say revenue no longer reliably covers their costs. Another 40% are barely breaking even, but not really able to pay themselves. These are businesses fighting to keep their doors open, or sometimes keeping their doors open because they see no other alternative. Numerous business owners describe this as the scale of crisis that felt like the COVID pandemic because of how dire the outlook is and because of how few customers have returned. Next slide. What should be clear is that fear in our communities shows up as red ink in our economy. A 1% drop in foot traffic results in $100 million in revenue losses across LA over a month. To businesses that make LA what it is, legacy businesses that anchor our neighborhoods, street vendors that make it a delight to live where we do. And while our research focuses on LA County, we know that immigration enforcement has had similar impact in cities across the United States. Next slide. So one of the goals in doing this work is to ensure that these harms are documented and that these findings are shared widely so that other cities and organizations use this and other excellent work that has been done on this issue as examples of how to document these harms and ensure that they continue reaching the public and policymakers. With that, I'm pleased to introduce Rudy Espinoza, President and CEO of Inclusive Action for the City. Inclusive Action is a Los Angeles nonprofit and community lender that builds strong local economies in low-income neighborhoods, serving entrepreneurs and working families. Rudy, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Armenta. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As Dr. Armenta shared, Inclusive Action is a nonprofit economic justice organization based here in Los Angeles. We are a CDFI certified small business lender, and our team is working hard to build an economy that works for everyone. Our programming touches folks all over the county of Los Angeles. If you look at the people we work with, you'll find a portfolio of clients that looks like Los Angeles. Immigrants, people of color, women, these are the folks that we serve. Dr. Armenta and her team asked me to just share some reactions to the findings. And I have a few headlines for you all. The first is when the findings came through, I realized, and I hope that you realize too, that these raids did not simply impact undocumented people. These raids were an attack on all of us, and they attacked our entire economy. I also am feeling that the impacts on the small businesses are lasting. Some of the raids took place maybe in weekly increments, or maybe there was one day where there was a targeted effort. But those businesses that were impacted are still feeling the pain of those raids from last summer. And so when an entrepreneur is impacted with a week or two of losses, it takes them a long time to recover. The team at UCLA is really showing us what is really happening here in our communities and what continues to happen, because the rates have not stopped. They are just changing. And we hope that this work not only documents what happened last summer, we hope that we can use this as a tool to share with policymakers and other neighbors about the importance of protecting our immigrant community and making sure that we're protecting small businesses who create jobs and generate a lot of resources for our city. Let me share a few points just as I close on some of the broader impact that the raids had on Inclusive Action's work. The first is that we saw firsthand, just to reiterate what Dr. Armenta shared, we saw firsthand that businesses were afraid to work outside. Some of our clients happen to be street vendors, and many of them, when the raid started last summer, called us to let us know that they were afraid to go outside. I personally interacted with street vendors that were afraid to even go on the sidewalk in front of their home because they were afraid they might be picked up. This fear does not help anybody, and it certainly doesn't help our economy. The other thing that I want to share with you all is that the raids are not the only threat that our community has been facing over the last couple of years. Last year, at the beginning of last year, our organization joined as a plaintiff in a lawsuit to stop the IRS from sharing sensitive taxpayer data with ICE. ICE was interested in gathering millions of taxpayer data in order to target where they live and to threaten them. And we joined in a lawsuit because this was another threat to our community in addition to the ICE raids. And we've also seen that there's been other threats to our community that continue to happen. A lot of folks were impacted by the Eaton fire last year. There was a big warehouse fire a couple of months ago here on the east side in Boyle Heights that has impacted a lot of small businesses. So we are seeing a compounding of crises that are impacting our small businesses. And so we have to come together and really think about how we support this really important element of our economy. I'll also share that a lot of the frontline organizations themselves that serve street vendors and micro entrepreneurs and other immigrant communities are also impacted during this time. Our staff are impacted directly by what's taking place in these threats. We have seen funders step back because they're afraid of also being targeted. And so we are seeing threats from all different sides. And we think it's really important that we think about how we not only document what's happening, but also think about how we come together. Inclusive action, despite all these threats, sees that there's a lot of opportunity. We are still seeing an opportunity to grow businesses. We still see that there's a need to access capital to invest and to create jobs. And we also see that there's a lot of opportunity to create policies that protect our communities and prevent these threats from happening again. But one thing for sure is that inclusive action is very clear what our organization stands for. We are clear that we are here to serve our neighbors. We are clear that our organization was established to stand with immigrant communities, and that is not going to change. And so I invite everybody here that's listening to this study to think about what is your role in standing with us and the communities that have been impacted by this. Certainly, every single day, I am inspired by the entrepreneurs that in an environment where there's so many obstacles and challenges, still figure out a way to build businesses and take care of their families. And with that, I want to cede my time to a couple of entrepreneurs who can share their experiences on what they went through. First, I'd like to introduce Gonzalo, the owner of Excellence Furniture. Thank you, Gonzalo, for being here with us.
Hola, buenas tardes. Gracias por la invitación.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me. Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon, can you hear me? Perfect. Do I have to turn my camera off? No, your camera is okay. Hello, my name is Gonzalo Monti. I have a business, furniture store 8 years ago that is located in the city of Kinglewood. And well, for me, it was a very huge impact all dates from immigration because we had suffered lots of reductions in our clients or customers that appeared before compared to the ones that are going to the business because they had another mood for acquiring even in families. But today, nowadays, just one single person because they are scared, one single member of the family. With that, we had a very big impact because our sales were reduced, but also we had to remove individuals from our business because we didn't have any sales. So it's mandatory for us to stop or fire people. And I had to by myself work for instead of 2 or 3 people because I don't have how to pay them. So I need to do 3 works, being one single person in the area that I work. Lots of redates appeared and the impact was so huge. And it's very, very sad because we always have a service for the community and we don't have or we don't see this will be improved in a short term. The situation is very difficult. Several clients customers called us that the husbands or wife were deported or they were captured and they don't want to pay the furniture they had under credit. And this is very sad for us because we are not talking about only money, we're talking about human loss. So it's very important for the development of any business, the human contact. So everybody is missing that. This continue being a situation where every single day we go like to fight in order to see how we can revert the situation. And sometimes we don't find any way to follow or to continue with that. Payment should be done. We have to continue with the business. The situation is very, very, very difficult, and we are there fighting, and we continue reinventing ourselves for the community, start having more trust in the location, in the area, and in themselves in order to buy things without any scare.
Muchas gracias, Gonzalo. And I'd like to introduce now another entrepreneur that's joining us, Aurora, who is one of our lovely street vendors here in Los Angeles.
Hello, good morning. My name is Aurora and I am a street seller with flowers. Previously, we had a store but with over dates. People were not on the streets like before, and we needed to close it. So we were like a street seller again, but with dates, high temperatures. It's a very big challenge because our product, because their flowers are very sensitive to the high temperatures. Now we are only having losses because every single day temperatures are very high. So our product is not able to stand that. We have two problems, the redates and this administration that frustrate us because sales are not good. We need to think in bills, in the rent, in the food. So especially today, because I have two kids on school and they are about to start. They need uniforms, they need clothing, they need shoes. And they are asking me, Mom, why we cannot buy this thing for school? And I said, sorry kids, but we need to think in the very essential things, even thinking on the school. Today, this week, I wanted to buy the clothing for going back to school. I didn't have the money for that. So this is very frustrating. This is very sad because with this stress, my husband and me, we have high blood pressure and we need lots of medication in order to keep it calm, controlled. And in my case, insomnia, every single day I cannot sleep because I'm thinking what's going to happen next year if we are going to have some food on the table. And sometimes we see our products being damaged, or maybe we don't have any type of losses. It's very frustrating to think that we're not going to have anything for the next rent in the next month. We're paying things as much as we can, and we have faith that everything is going to be changed soon, but we don't know how the reality is going to face us. I think we have the power to change situations working together. We can put not only feelings and emotions, but also situations, because as street vendors, sellers, we have the illusion to sell our products in order to eat or to being educated or to survive. Please, I would like to request you to put not only your efforts, but also to change the mindset in every single person that is against us, because the daily basis we are facing on is very, very sad, because we don't know what is going to happen soon, later, tomorrow, in the afternoon. We don't know. The future it's an uncertainty. What's happening tomorrow, for our children, for us, it's very sad. I would like to request you, to ask you, please, your support, if you have the possibility to raise our voices or our concerns. I don't know, in votations, in voting pools. I don't know. Anything you can do for changing the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rudy, Gonzalo, y Aurora. We're especially grateful for Gonzalo y Aurora for sharing their experiences with us today. I'd like to now bring it back to Rudy and our panelists so we can get together for our discussion. Joining Rudy today is Rocio Flores, founder of Brillantes Emprendedoras Latinas de Los Ángeles, BELLA, an organization that supports Latina entrepreneurs in East and South Los Angeles by providing business development opportunities, resources, and access to funding to grow the businesses. We also have Vanessa Gutierrez, the owner of Más Amor and co-founder of the El Sereno Night Market, a weekly community market that brings together local food and small businesses, live entertainment, and neighbors. Rocio, Vanessa, thank you for joining us today. The first question I have is for each one of you. So thinking back to the raids, once they really started and got heavy in June 2025, what changes did you foresee among the small business owners, workers, and clients? And since then, what is recovery looking like?
Do you want me to, should I go first, Lucia? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. Going to your question, Lila, the effects that I saw were immediately. I saw so much fear and uncertainty among not only the small business owners, but the entire community from everyone, from the people. It became a ghost town everywhere that I saw. Nobody was coming out. And unfortunately, I feel that we are not yet in recovery mode. I feel that we are still surviving this. Many of the changes, nothing really has changed since last year. If anything, I still see a lot of fear within the community, especially where I'm at in El Sereno. There is still a lot of fear, and I'm not sure exactly right now what the recovery is yet to look like. All I know is that the only way that we will continue to survive this is by leaning into our community and sticking together as much as possible, because what I've seen, that's the only way we're going to be able to get through this.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Lila. So there was definitely a lot of challenges. I think the data is very telling. But we also saw, aside from business disruptions, we saw that personal, raw emotion. And that was from our families, our friends, and for self, oftentimes. The fear, I think, stretched beyond the day-to-day. And just for context, here at BELLA, we serve a wide spectrum of different businesses. So we support street vendors, but also home-based businesses, online businesses, and brick and mortars. And they range from startups all the way to folks that maybe have had their business for over a decade. And so we did see those business closures, but we also saw those impacts to mental health and well-being as our families were being torn apart. And it was very difficult to witness, experience, be there to support our emprendedoras. But you know what I also saw was community coming together, was folks organizing, mobilizing. We saw empathy and compassion shine through. And I saw a lot of direct service support like food delivery, financial assistance. Our friends here at Inclusive Action did a beautiful job at responding right away. Other partners stepped up to help, shared resources, and safe spaces were created. And so when we think about like recovery and where we are today and where we need to go, we saw our emprendedoras show up for one another. We saw presence in spite of grief and fear. Here at BELLA, we launched our relief fund. It was very small compared to some other wonderful organizations, but we were able to pull direct cash assistance as well from our funds to support our local communities. We saw a lot of collaboration come through to raise those funds, to provide therapy and healing circles. We saw allyship come together to advocate, to educate. And as I mentioned, community partners just stepping up. So our community constantly checked in on one another, how we were doing, not just with our business, but personally and with our families. So we know it's not over. we continue to hold grief and hope together as we try to continue to build and rebuild, while also acknowledging that there's hard truths and what continues to happen around us. So we can't let this mobilizing end. This requires all of us. It's an effort. We can't do it alone. We need to stay united.
We already have some questions from the audience, and I think this one, I'll start it actually with Rudy, but I'd like to hear from the other panelists as well. What type of small business assistance is available to those that have been affected by the ICE raids?
Yeah, I mean, as Rocio mentioned, when the ICE raids were really prominent and they were all over our phones and we were seeing the videos, a lot of people came together to do things. I saw a lot of Angelinos buying street vendors out. I saw social media stars talking about how we need to support businesses. We have folks like Vanessa and Rocio stepped up to do programming and gather people. So there's so much activity. Inclusive Action joined with our partners in the LA Street Vendor Campaign, and we set up a fund to support street vendors that were impacted by the raids. I will say that resources are, I see a question here too about what is available now, and there's not a lot is the answer. I think part of it is because we have such a short attention span. We think that the raids were last year and it's not happening anymore. Or we think that, oh, that was a long time ago, and or somebody I bought out one vendor and now I'm good. I think that the work that we have to do together as a community is stay with each other, that we really have to like lean into solidarity and continue to support each other day after day, even if there's no viral social media hit, you know? And that's a little bit harder. The other layer here to this is that our government is also limited in resources too. And LA County and the state are also being impacted by the administration's decisions. And so there isn't a lot of resources that are coming down to support our small businesses. So what we have to do is get creative. We have to continue to advocate and speak up. One of the things that was a big win this year is that our team at Inclusive Action joined with other partners to advocate for the SEED program in the state of California to get grants to immigrant entrepreneurs. And we were successful in that, but that was a lot of hard work. So we just have to keep pushing and supporting each other. But it might feel like we don't need to, but we do. And we have to do it even if it's not glamorous or there's no social media attention.
Yes, I agree. I think the conversation can't cease, right? We get comfortable. We turn to social media or news a lot, and if we don't see it there, sometimes it's not as present for folks. But I think what's important, what we've seen, although it's been ongoing, not just during the immigration raids or COVID, was the need for capital to be able to sustain and to grow. But I would couple that with like trusting relationships of organizations, micro lenders, TA providers that folks trust and build that relationship, and that guidance is there. Because a lot of folks don't know not just where to go, but who to trust. And so I think staying present and just showing up for folks consistently is really important. We can't kind of come in when there's crisis and leave. Folks need to see us every day. And so that is something that, I challenge all of us to continue to be present.
Also going based off what Rudy and Rocio mentioned, I think it is unfortunate that the resources have depleted tremendously, and people have forgotten that it is still an ongoing issue and it's still happening, just not as loud anymore. But yeah, I feel that really, I like what Rocio said, like going to trusted enterprises and also like loan offices where you could get some resources to help you just alleviate for the time being, but not going to sugarcoat it. It is very, very, very difficult regardless of the matter of fact.
So Vanessa, I actually want to follow up with you, but it's also a question for Rocio and the rest of the panelists as well. How did you and how are other organizations helping vendors and customers feel safe right now? And it seems that the effects are still impacting all vendors and small businesses. So many of the questions in the Q&A are from community members who are just asking, what can we do? So what can people do?
Yeah, so with me in the Alcerino night market, making sure that our vendors and community felt safe was my biggest priority. And it was when the ice raid started, it was a very difficult decision to pause the market temporarily because our vendors, they depend on this income. One day of work makes or breaks whether they're going to be able to put food on the table or be able to invest in more inventory so they can work the next day. So one thing that I did during that time is really lean into the community, and I went to social media. I created a support vendor fund where I was raising money for our vendors at the Alcerino Night Market, and by the grace of God and just social media, I was very grateful that we were able to raise a little bit over $16,000. And with this money, we were directly giving it to our vendors. It was a blessing that we were able to pay for their rent, be able to pay for their car insurance, even for food or for basic necessities that were needed in the home. Another thing that we did was team up with a group in El Sereno called the Alcerino Community Care Collective. And this group was formed during the ice raids and it moved really quickly. And what they helped us do when we after 6 weeks, we were able to return back to the night market. Again, it was very scary and very it was a very difficult decision for me to even come back as well, because if something were to ever happen to the vendors or to anybody in my community, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself. So what we did was partner up with this group, and they became I call them my care bears. They were patrolling the neighborhood, making sure if they saw any site of ICE activities to alert us. We began also to have delivery service where the community can put in an order with one of our vendors and volunteers will come and deliver the food so that they can support the vendors and also feel safe that they wouldn't have to come out. We also worked with other small businesses around the Alcerino Night Market as a safety plan. So if ICE were to arrive, we made a plan of where community members and our vendors can go and seek and can just hide basically from the ICE raids. But thankfully, we never had to experience anything of that sort. But that was some of the things that we did to keep supporting during this time. I just want to know, did I answer every part of the question? Yeah, okay.
You did, and I think for the rest of the panelists, building off of that, our participants are really curious, how can they help? How can they support? How can they get involved?
I think one of the biggest way to support is to, well, for me personally, is to attend the Alcerino Night Market if you feel safe and if you have ultimately the privilege, to be able to be in these places without fear. Really coming and visiting is because we put so much effort to put these weekly event for the community and for people to just come and enjoy. We also have a jumper for kids. So if family needs to, let their kids like seem off some energy, they can jump in the jumper and just enjoy and really pay like support the small business and the vendors. And honestly, if you see any street vendors along anywhere you're driving by, make an effort to stop by. And if maybe you don't want to buy what they're selling, just giving them a little bit of cash could really support them. As for us, for the Alcerino Night Market, if you'd like to come and join us and volunteer, I'll be more than happy to have you.
Lila, I'll just add a couple of things. I see questions here from the audience about what to do and what resources are available. Resources are limited, but we have a lot. We can do a lot together, and I have a few sort of call outs for people. The first is that this data in this report is really important, and we want more people to hear about it. And so if you know of a place where we can go and share this data with people, like call us, let us know. We'd love to go on a roadshow and tell people about this. Thanks again to our funders that invested in this work. But we want to tell people about it. We don't want it just to be hidden on a shelf. We want people to know how the rates impacted small businesses. So the second is, as Vanessa said, sometimes when we see these huge challenges in our society, we think we have to be Superman or Superwoman and put on a cape and like save the world. Sometimes it just takes going to the Edison night market and having dinner there. That's all it takes. And those little things really add up. And so I just want to, encourage folks that doing some of the quote unquote small things really matter. Inclusive Action has a hire a vendor program, so you can hire a street vendor if you need some catering support for a party that's coming up. That's a way to get some revenue into some of the vendors that have been impacted. And then the last thing that I'll share is sort of a call out for folks that's on my mind is that, some people are afraid to talk about this. So we have over 300 people that are listening. I want to just say thank you for listening to this. There's a lot of people that don't even want to hear this. They're afraid. And I understand the fear. But the only way we overcome the fear is by coming together and starting to have some conversations. So I want to just encourage folks that if you work in a place that's afraid to talk about this, talk to us and see if we could brainstorm a way to begin a discussion, especially if you work at a corporation, especially if you work in philanthropy and they don't want to invest in this, let us know. We have a special dinner coming up next month, and we're looking for someone to co-host with us. So maybe there's a corporation that wants to donate and be a co-host with us, and it'll be fun and we'll confront our fears together. But I just want to say that, there's many ways to help. It doesn't have to be loud and, storming the White House. It doesn't have to be that. It could simply be going to dinner with Vanessa.
And I'll just add to that very briefly. I think that continuing to educate our small business communities, again, I think about, our response when there's crisis is good, but what are we doing in between? Because we know that a lot of these challenges continue to happen, right? So how do we continue to build the capacity of our small businesses to educate, to share those legal resources, like others have mentioned, and of course to donate, because I know, Inclusive Action, El Sereno Night Market, and Bella as well, we continue to provide services, but there's so many other organizations out there that do similar work. And again, we can't do this on our own. In silos, isolated is not the solution. It's coming together like this, having these hard conversations. And for us at Bella, we had to pivot somewhat, right? Because you have this plan of what you're going to do for the year, the next few months, and something happens and you need to respond, and you need to be willing to make changes internally as an organization and really listen to what the needs are and where the gaps are. And that is something that we try to do. And so I think just continuing to listen, to advocate, to be allies, and to continue to just work together is super important.
Thank you. So we have another question, and actually I'll kind of take this to Dr. Armenta and for Rudy. What are some of the pressing issues right now that can potentially be addressed through legislation at the state level? What does that mean for policy change?
Sure. If I can just pick up on something that Rocio just mentioned, is the importance to have infrastructure in place with trusted organizations to support small businesses at all times. Especially in LA County, we can think of a number of emergencies and disasters that have happened over the last 5 years, from COVID to different wildfires to the warehouse fire to the ice raids. And at each moment, the infrastructure should be set up to push out money to small businesses, because it's difficult to own and run a small business, honestly, at any time. And each of these additional challenges just makes it more difficult for places that we want in our neighborhoods and our cities. And so the next stage of this project with Inclusive Action is to work with organizations and affected entrepreneurs to discuss policy responses, and we will be publishing a policy toolkit in the next couple of months to push for specific policy levers that we think can make a difference. Rudy, passing it off.
So I think stay tuned for folks that are listening and they're curious about what are the advocacy work that we can do. We got some stuff cooking, so stay tuned. I will tell you that there was a question or a comment from Jose here in the chat about marketing efforts to support businesses in neighborhoods. That could be a policy intervention. That could be a budget allocation. That could be our county supervisor or state senator saying, hey, this is really important. I want to make sure it's a priority and we're going to institutionalize marketing support for businesses in certain areas. Last year, for example, friends, we worked on a bill to protect the data of street vendors that were getting permits. We didn't want that data to be shared. And so we worked with Senator Maria Elena Durazo to pass Senate Bill 635 last year. So there's a lot of things that we can do at the state level, even and at the local level to protect small businesses. And we hope the data in this report helps to inform that.
Thank you. And I want to just point one question to Rocio, but as well for the rest of the panel, kind of thinking about capital and business support. We know that many of the small business owners already faced extensive barriers before the raids. We understand that the raids have made this worse, in addition to the loss of customers and revenue, deepening those barriers. What kind of support have business owners been seeking since then?
Yeah, as I had mentioned earlier, capital is definitely a need, always a need. And, at Bella, we provide microloans through our partnership with TMC Community Capital. I know Inclusive Action also has amazing products, loan products. And I know sometimes folks shy away from that, right? We do need to develop resources like grants or direct cash aid that can help our businesses. So I know there's actually been, I think, in recent years, more mobilization around creating grant funds. At the end of the day, they remain really competitive in terms of there's a lot of folks seeking these funds. And so I think joining forces to be able to create these funds that are grant-based, that are cash aid-based, and I will say not making the applications complicated, right? That is something that we hear a lot about where, I apply for this $1,000 grant and I have to submit all this, previous documentation, and this application's 20 pages long, and it's a lot of work for folks. And then when folks sometimes get that denial because it happens, they get just really, they feel really helpless. Like, why did I even do this? It took up so much time. I didn't even get the grant, right? So I think on like leaders and philanthropists and all of us working in the space as to how can we create not just these funds for our entrepreneurs and business owners, but a process that gets us the information we need and that it's responsible, but is that not overly complicated for our business owners, and then having that direct support. So I've seen more of it coming out. I think we need to continue to build these funds and to have them consistently, and just know that these micro loans, lenders like Inclusive Action for the City as a CDFI, as mission-based, that there are support through loans, low cost, low percentage interest loans that folks can access. So the resources are there.
Thank you. So I want to acknowledge we're getting close to the end of our discussion. So I wanted to ask if all of the panelists can just do some brief lightning round takeaways. We have participants here who are community members, who are business owners, who are funders, who are people who want to help. What are some closing thoughts from each of you?
I could start. I would say two things. First is that an attack on immigrants is an attack on all of us. So the raids had broader impacts in our economy that was not just isolated to immigrants or undocumented immigrants. So please take that away from this, take that from the study. The second is that there's a lot of hope. I think there's a lot of opportunity. We heard from Gonzalo Narora earlier, like these folks are the folks we need to bet on. We need to invest in them. And we need to get creative and work with our policymakers to invest more. We have folks like organizers like Vanessa and Rocio here that are organizing spaces and trainings for entrepreneurs. There's a lot of tools at our disposal. So it's hard out here, but we can't lose hope. So we just got to keep going and stick together.
I agree. I think some folks may have heard the saying, joy is our strongest resistance. Probably butchered that a little bit, but to say that, we want to live, we want to continue to live, right? Our families deserve better. And we need to be able to stand up for each other, check in with each other consistently. Again, I go back to beyond the business disruptions, which happens, and unfortunately, that's the livelihood of a lot of folks, is they're doing their business full time, is that it's also impacting them on a personal level, their mental health, their families, their children. So we need to look at this very holistically. We need to look at this more systematically and just keep that front and center. Find those spaces where maybe if we don't know the information, where can I find it? Are there, centers like the one at UCLA where you can have that data, where you can connect with staff and researchers, with community leaders, with going to the El Sereno night market and shopping, where you can support Bella and our Latina emprendedoras. We also have an online marketplace where you can see Latina-owned businesses in LA and how can I support them? So continuing to shop local and buy local. So there's a lot we can do. I think it's multifaceted, but to not stop having that conversation, right? We need to continue, but doing it from a place, like Rudy says, of hope and of joy, and centering that, I think, is probably our greatest strength.
I think going what Rudy and Rocio said is beautiful. I think also just one of the closing remarks is just remember how powerful your dollar is, especially in Latino community. We make up such a big part of the economy. So the more mindful, the more wholesome when we are spending our dollar, I would just say spend it in the right place. Spend it in the most local as possible. We have a lot of power when it comes, and that's what gives me hope. And also be kind. Let's continue that. At the end of the day, we are all just humans. We're all deserving of making a living and living in a safe space. And unfortunately, right now, that's not what it looks like. So I think leaning more into like kindness and love and compassion and joy, I think if they can't break our spirits, then we have to keep moving forward and know that right now it is really, really tough, but I believe there is light at the end of this. And like we mentioned throughout this webinar, we have seen so much unity through this. The silver lining is that. So let's keep pushing, not give up. And like my dad always tells me, con ánimo. We have to keep going. And I think that's one thing of like our people, our spirits are so beautiful and resilient. So spend your money where it counts.
I can't say it any better than that. But I did want to add, someone mentioned in the questions and answers that the immigration attacks and the other attacks that we've seen on different sectors of the community, they touch all aspects of our society, right? They touch healthcare, they touch small businesses, they touch students in our schools. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by all of this, but I hope that, we're here because we're engaged. These things don't last forever, and we will win. So I hope that if you're here, that you can partner with us, spend your dollars where it counts, support organizations and entrepreneurs like this, support research. And Lila, I'll pass it back to you.
So this brings us to the end of our discussion. I just want to thank all of the participants and Amada, Rudy, Rocio, Gonzalo, Aurora, Vanessa. Thank you all for sharing your lived experience, your insight, your expertise. Want to encourage everybody to download and share the report to help us continue to get these findings into the hands of people who can use them. We also want to invite you to learn more about the work of LPPI and Inclusive Action. You can see the links to our website, and we will include that in follow-up resources. One last thing I want to say is that we are going to be releasing policy recommendations and hopefully coming back to the public with more information on this. We cannot do that without your support. If you value this work, we invite you to support our organizations and help us produce this research, this community work. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today, and have a good rest of your day.